Okay, this is the first of two videos on dig deeper supporting sentences. And this first video we will be talking about what to add to your sentences. Okay, so to make these supporting sentences more interesting, better sentences, the first thing that we can add are adjectives. Okay, adjectives are they describe nouns. So when you have a simple sentence and you want to add to that sentence to make it better and more interesting, the first thing you can do is describe the noun, okay? Fluffy, soft cat is an example. The noun there is cat, and we use the words fluffy and soft to describe it, okay? Another example is red sports car. Okay, red is describing the car and sports is describing the car. So in both of these examples so far we have two adjectives. All right, this last one we only have one adjective, snowy branches. The noun is branches and snowy is describing the branches. Okay, so that's the first thing that we can do to make these sentences better and more interesting is to add adjectives. The next thing we can do is to add adverbs. And adverbs describe the verb. Okay? So if our verb is stood and we describe how something stood, then we could say stood intensely. So if you actually put that together with the first one there under our adjectives, you could say, the fluffy, soft cat stood intensely. That's a whole lot more interesting than just saying the cat stood. We don't have the rest of the sentence there, but it is much more interesting to say the fluffy, soft cat stood intensely. Let's look at another example. Raced wildly. Okay. The verb there is raced, and how did whatever it was race? It raced wildly. So if we put that together with the second example under our adjectives there, the red sports car raced wildly. Okay, that tells us how the red sports car raced wildly. Okay, makes it much more interesting than just saying the car raced. All right. Our third example is crack loudly. The verb here is crack. And what is describing that crack is loudly. How did something crack? It cracked loudly. So we can say the snowy branches crack loudly. Okay. The next thing that we can do to make these sentences more interesting and better is we can add transition words. Okay? And this helps the flow of from one sentence to the next. And some examples of transition words are then, next, additionally, also, after, furthermore. Okay, so if we add one of these transition words to what we've been working on so far with these adjectives and adverbs, if we could say, after the fluffy, soft cat stood intensely, now we need something more. It's getting very interesting though. Furthermore, the red sports car raced wildly. Then the snowy branches cracked loudly. So those transition words just help it flow just a little bit nicer. Another example of transition words are order words. First, second, third, and so on. Also, the word last is considered an order word. So you can use those as well, especially if you are describing in your writing how to do something. First you do this, then you do that, third you do this. You don't always want to just use order words. You might want to switch it up a bit to make it interesting, okay? So that is the third way to add things to your supporting sentences to make them interesting. And the last way we're going to talk about today is prep phrases, and that means prepositional phrases, okay? And a little trick someone once told me is prepositions are words that are anywhere a squirrel can go. So if a squirrel can go under, then that's a preposition. If a squirrel can go in, then the word in is a preposition. If the squirrel can go around, then the word around is a preposition. So if you can close your eyes and picture a squirrel doing that word, then that word is for sure a preposition in the beginning of a prepositional phrase. So kind of keep that in your head for future reference, that any word that describes where a squirrel can go. So anywhere a squirrel can go. Okay, a squirrel can go up a tree, a squirrel can go over a log, a squirrel can go behind the tree. So up, over, behind, those are all prepositional phrases. And prepositional phrases give us more information. Okay, and when we get a little bit more information, the sentence becomes so much stronger and so much more interesting. So here is the first example of a prepped phrase: on the bench. So if we go back and use the things that we've already learned here on this page so far, we could say, after the fluffy soft cat stood intensely on the bench. We may need a little bit more. Okay, you could also use the word also. Also, the fluffy soft cat stood intently on the bench. Okay, it sounds very interesting. I'd kind of like to know what happens after the cat stood intensely on the bench. Okay, our next example of a prep phrase here is over the hill. Okay. Then the red sports car raced wildly over the hill. So we've used all of our things here so far. Okay. The last example is outside my window. Okay. Furthermore, the snowy branches crack loudly outside my window. So that would be a very good, strong sentence in a story about, a heavy snowfall. All right. There's one more thing I want to touch on this page, and that is more interesting verb. Okay. A lot of times there are verbs that work in a sentence, but they're not real interesting. Okay. And one of those verbs that is not real interesting is the verb go or went. A lot of times you can use a better, more descriptive verb than the verb go or went. Okay? For an example, if we're using the second example there in describe in adverbs, raced wildly, we could say went wildly. The red sports car went wildly. But that doesn't give us as much of a vivid picture in our head as raced. So we don't really want to use the word go or went wildly. We want to use the word raced wildly. So you can really see that sports car racing wildly over the hill. Okay? So some examples of words that you could use instead of go or went would be run, hurries. Okay? The boy runs down the road instead of the boy went down the road. The boy hurries down the road. Gives us a better image of how the boy's going. Okay, if we just said the boy went down the road or the boy goes down the road, we don't know whether he's in a hurry. We don't know whether he's just going slow. We don't know whether like how is he going down the road? But if we use the word run or hurries, then that gives us a much more vivid picture in our head of how he's going. Okay, the boy could also saunter down the road, which just sort of means go slowly, looking around. If you saunter, it's just sort of a stroll. Okay, it's just a nice little. The boy could also gallop down the road. So maybe it's a little boy and he likes to pretend he's a horse. So he may be walking down the road with his mom, and instead of saying the boy goes down the road, you could say the boy gallops down the road, or went down the road, the boy galloped down the road. That's a much more vivid picture of that little boy sort of bouncing up and down, galloping down the road. Okay, and the last two examples are skipped and crawled. The boy skipped down the road. There you can see a boy skipping down the road. It gives you a much more vivid picture of how it's happening. And then maybe the boy is a little baby and he crawled down the road. Maybe he snuck out the house and he crawled down the road. That would be kind of scary, but it gives you a picture in your head of exactly how it's happening. Okay, so whenever you're writing, make sure you go back and you look at your verb and you think, could I change that to something that would give me a better picture in my head and be more interesting? All right, so the first homework assignment for this week is to give me some examples of your own. Okay, if you see there right underneath where it says dig deeper, it says give your own examples of adjectives plus nouns and adverbs plus verbs plus adverbs. Okay, just like I did on my paper. Prepositional phrases. Okay, that's sort of that last shovel. And then I also want you to go up to the middle shovel on the right-hand side there and see if you can't think of maybe two more transition words that I didn't list, because there's more than what I listed there on the paper. Okay? And last, think of some interesting verbs you could do I have a typo there. Think of some interesting verbs you could use instead of sit or sat. Sorry about that, Dewey. You could use instead of sit or sat. So, give me some, at the very bottom there, give me some words that are better than sit or sat. Words that give you a more vivid picture in your brain of sit or sat. How did they sit or sat? Just really think about words that might describe what that person is doing whenever they sit or whenever they sat down, okay? So you can go ahead and do this page and then upload your answers to me or send them to me via my email that I have posted on the classroom page. If you have any questions, be sure to just post on the classroom page and I'll get right to your question and answer it. So have a good week, and there'll be a second video either later on today or tomorrow with the second part of this week's assignment. So have a good week.